All right, now stop right there. Now, before you go running off to the comments to say that some of these are not underrated in the least, I have something to say in my defense about these picks. I have loads of guitar solos uploaded to my channel, as I've recently spent much of my time learning and playing my way through Guitar World Magazine's top 100 solos of all time. Now, aside from these 100, I've added 10 honorable mentions, solos that I felt were worthy, but were not on this list. Plus, there's probably another 20 or 30 solos that I've uploaded for various reasons, tutorials and whatnot, or just because I wanted to. That said, I've learned and played a hell of a lot of guitar solos over the past few years, and I figured that I might as well jam a few of them together into a few top 5 or top 10 supercuts, see if I might hook up the YouTube algorithm with one of them and direct a few eyeballs towards my channel. This will be a supercut of all of my honorable mentions to the Guitar World list, with one notable change, but we will get to that in a moment. If you've been following my channel from the very beginning, you may have seen most of these or some of these, so it's not too late to opt out of this video right now, but please don't. For the rest of you, please stick around. But first, a quick word about the definition of what we would call underrated. So first up, what is rating exactly? Well, it's compiling a list of 10 or 50 or 75 or 100, etc. of anything really, but for our purposes, it's guitar solos, and ranking them from worst to best. Ranking something too low, or in this case, the cardinal sin of leaving something highly worthy completely off the list, well, that would be underrating. And these solos fit that criteria as far as Guitar World Magazine's list of the top 100 greatest solos is concerned. So sure, a few of these solos on my list are generally very highly rated and appreciated in most guitar circles, especially my top 2 or 3. So don't give me any grief about those picks, because if they weren't on the list of arguably the leading publication of all things guitar related, then I'm calling them underrated because they should be there. So let's begin with my pick for number 10. My number 10 is by Ritchie Blackmore of Deep Purple. This one is the one change that I've made with regards to my original honorable mentions. I've included this one and removed something else. I was kind of losing my mind over Irish guitarist Gary Moore a little bit over the past few years, and had included him twice. He's still here, of course, but we're going to remove Gary's The Loner, which would have been in this spot, and replace it with the solo to Child in Time from Ritchie Blackmore. An absolute chaotic ripper of a solo from Ritchie, and one of his very best and longest. Just amazing that he was playing at this level in the late 60s, sounding like absolutely nobody else at the time with his blending of blues rock and classical licks. Really super influential and important stuff, and hard as balls to play. This is the solo to Child in Time from Ritchie Blackmore and Deep Purple as my number 10 honorable mention and underrated solo. My number 9 underrated solo is by two guitarists who were a huge influence on me as a young lad, and surprisingly did not have one entry on Guitar World's list: Adrian Smith and Dave Murray of Iron Maiden. And it's not for a lack of metal solos. There's lots of metal solos on the list, but none by these two metal pioneers and incredibly talented players. I actually had a hard time choosing which one to include from the loads of great solos that these guys have put down over the years. I finally decided upon these three solos to power slave because they're three of my favorites. And then I went on a few guitar forums to double check my pick, only to find out that it looks like I chose correctly. It's generally considered one of, if not the best trio of solos from these two incredible soloists. These are the solos to power slave from Dave Murray, Adrian Smith, and then Dave Murray again, as my number 9 honorable mention and underrated solo. Eight is a solo that I absolutely love, by a guy whose famous last words were, sadly, "Don't worry, it's not loaded," right before he put the pistol to his head and pulled the trigger. That man's name was Terry Kath of the band Chicago, and he was one of the most underrated and understated lead guitarists of the 70s and late 60s. I say understated because for the most part, Chicago's music didn't lend itself very well to ripping, ear-bending guitar solos. So Terry Kath only got to show his very formidable soloing chops on the rare recorded occasion. This track, 25 or 6 to 4, was most definitely one of those occasions for Terry Kath to really cut loose and shine. Kath knew his place within the confines of Chicago and knew when to play and when not to play. He held numerous roles within the group. Aside from being lead guitarist, he was also a hell of a rhythm player, one of the chief songwriters, and also one of the lead vocalists within the group. Not enough people who know this guy's name, in my opinion. This is Terry Kath and Chicago with the solo to 25 or 6 to 4 as my number 8 pick.
25 or 6 to 4.
number 7, we have a solo by a guy even less well known than my previous pick at number 8 with Terry Kath. And his name is Burton Avare. And Burton was the lead guitarist for the 70s band The Knack. And the solo is the one from their mega hit, My Sharona. This one is so underrated. Just an incredible guitar solo that few too many people know about. And there's a very good and unfortunate reason for that, actually. As big a hit that this song was, and is still a staple of classic rock radio to this very day, at the time it was the band's only hit. And unfortunately, the album cut of the song was far too long for top 40 radio play. The horrible solution that was made to remedy this situation? Castrate the long guitar solo from the radio cut. Nowadays, most classic rock radio will play the track in its entirety, but for years, all anyone heard was the solo-free radio edit. Maybe the radio edit had a short solo, I can't remember completely, but it certainly didn't have this beauty in its entirety. This is my number 7 underrated guitar solo with Burton Avare and The Knack with the solo to My Sharona. My number 6 underrated solo is easily one of the most difficult solos that I've ever learned, and its importance in guitar history cannot be understated. It's the solo to Sails of Charon by German guitarist Uli John Roth with the Scorpions from 1977. Building on the guitar pathways laid down previously by Deep Purple's Ritchie Blackmore, but taking it to a whole new beautiful level, Uli John Roth basically created an entire new genre of guitar playing, neoclassical. While Blackmore before him had dabbled in adding classically inspired lead lines into his blues-based playing, it was Uli who took it all the way and created this monster of a solo. Arguably the first fully formed neoclassical guitar solo, a feat that would obviously be much copied, imitated, and studied going forward into the 80s. Uli gets a bit lost in the annals of guitar history because he insisted on leaving the Scorpions and forging his own path, creating music that didn't really find much of an audience, especially in comparison to the mass success that the Scorpions would achieve without him in the lead guitar role. Regardless, this solo is his masterpiece and most well-known creation. This is my number 6 most underrated solo. This is Uli John Roth and the solo to Sails of Charon. Now, when the subject of underrated guitar soloists and or guitar players comes up, this guy's name is usually much discussed and at or near the top of any list. With only one entry on Guitar World Magazine's Top 100 list, and that for a solo from very, very early in his career. Also, it's quite low at like number 94, 95. This guy could and should have multiple entries on any list. And that guy's name is Alex Lifeson of Rush. And the solo that I'm choosing as his most underrated is the solo to Rush's instrumental La Villa Strangiato. 2 solos, actually. And in showing just how brilliant and creative a guitar player Lifeson is, they sound nothing alike. From its eerie, soft opening of volume swells, the 2 solos continue to grow and build and evolve until by the end of the second solo, it just erupts into a blistering, chaotic flurry of manic notes. It's a perfectly constructed pair of solos and extremely well thought out and played, one of Alex Lifeson's finest. These are the 2 solos to La Villa Strangiato by Alex Lifeson and Rush as my number 5 pick of the most underrated solos. David Gilmour. As an artist with any number of extremely famous solos, of course there are those that fly under the radar and don't get the love and attention that they deserve, at least compared to the more famous ones. This one would be my pick. His longest continuous stretch of solos, if I'm not mistaken, and that would be the opening trio of solos to Pink Floyd's Shine On You Crazy Diamond, an absolute stellar showcase of Gilmour's prowess on the guitar that goes onwards for upwards of like 5 minutes. There are any number of Gilmour solos that could have been slotted in here that are underrated, but this one is going to be my pick. These are the solos to Shine On You Crazy Diamond by David Gilmour and Pink Floyd as my number 4 pick of underrated guitar solos. Now, we're getting into the top 3, and 3 solos that are just inexcusable for Guitar World magazine to have left off their list. This is one of the most famous and most difficult guitar solos ever recorded, a rite of passage, if you will, for any young guitar shredder or old guitar shredder. So good, in fact, is this solo that it had a whole movie built around it. Of course, I'm talking about what's known as Eugene's Trick Bag by Steve Vai, the closing classically inspired winning move that Lightning Boy, played by Ralph Macchio, pulls out of his classical bag of tricks to finally beat the devil with in the movie Crossroads. Maybe because it's a standalone solo and not actually part of a song that it gets left off most lists of greatest solos, but it is a solo here in the truest sense of the word. It's iconic, it's famous, it's by one of our generation's most well-known and accomplished players, and it is hard as all hell to play. This is my number 3 underrated, but not really, solo by Steve Vai. This is Eugene's Trick Bag from the movie Crossroads. My number 2 is from one of my all-time favorite guitar players and one of the most versatile players to ever pick up a guitar. Sadly, he is no longer with us, and his name is Gary Moore from Ireland. And the solo is from his song Still Got the Blues. A solo that kind of suffered the same fate as my Sharona that I mentioned earlier, at least as far as its killer guitar solo goes. Still Got the Blues was arguably Gary's biggest international hit, and like my Sharona by the Knack, it was too long for general radio play, and video play for that matter, so it needed to be chopped. And like my Sharona, what got chopped was the extended outro guitar solo. Unfortunate for the listener, it was one of Gary's very best solos that didn't get itself into nearly as many ears as the edited version of the song. It's just a gorgeous guitar solo and deserves much more recognition. We'll give it some love here today and drop it in at number 2 on my list. This is Gary Moore and the solo to Still Got the Blues in its entirety. My number one is arguably not underrated at all. It's one of the greatest metal solos of all time, and most top guitar solos lists recognize it as such, but not Guitar World. They didn't have it on their list at all, and that's my criteria for adding it here. It's from the song Tornado of Souls by Megadeth, and it's performed by the incredible metal soloist Marty Friedman. You know, at times the Guitar World list of top 100 turned into a bit of a popularity contest with, like numerous solos by Kurt Cobain, who really isn't a soloist at all. And he would have told you that. He hated guitar solos, so he just generally made a lot of noise. 3 or 4 entries from Kirk Hammett and Metallica, who, while admittedly is a very, very good soloist, but he's really not on par with the likes of Marty Friedman. But Metallica happens to be much more popular than Megadeth. Overlooking this solo was a huge oversight, in my opinion. Were it on my list, it would be in the top 10. It's widely considered one of the holy grails of metal soloing, and deservedly so. This is my number one. This is the solo to Tornado of Souls by Marty Friedman and Megadeth. Well, I hope you liked that little trip down memory lane with me, with a look at my honorable mention list of underrated solos. Some of these I did as far back as 2.5 years ago, I think. But like I said, it's good to get them together in one video and maybe hook the algorithm on YouTube, because I sure as hell haven't done it yet. But we'll see how it goes. I hope you're well in your little guitar corner of the world, and we will see you next time. Cheers.